at the end of the day, I want to have the biggest impact with my work as possible. But also, that should be hand in hand and with enjoying every moment on this planet as much as possible, and for everyone that I interact with. So if I can show up for my son, for my wife, for my friends, for my business, for everyone as happy and calm and just enjoying things, like everything is going to be better. Like my decision making is going to be better. Right. My idea generation, like everything that I'm here to do.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. Delighted to be joined today all the way from Olympic Park in London. We have sports portrait and lifestyle photographer, director. Welcome to the show today, Duncan Nicholls. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul. It's wonderful to be here today. It's been a few months in the making, going back and forward. So thanks for your patience. And I'm really stoked to be here and for the conversation ahead.
Brilliant. Really looking forward to it. So we've got a lot to talk about and a lot of different angles which you cover off, who you help, how you help them. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What got you to where you are today?
Thank you, Paul. So I've been a photographer for the last 16 years and a sort of a filmmaker and director for the last 6. In terms of what I shoot, it's very much sort of with an emphasis on sort of sports fashion and portrait, and sort of working with sort of elite level athletes for a lot of the sort of the Nikes, the Adidases, the NFLs, Under Armours, a lot of the big sort of brands. But and that's kind of generally been the focus. A lot of people work, a lot of campaigns sort of for good, and This Girl Can, and a lot of other sort of charity work within that as well. But that's sort of been my the trajectory over the last sort of 16 years. Before that, a kind of a non-linear sort of way into it. Economics degree, went to and then basically from that worked in investment banking for 6 years. I was on the grad scheme at UBS, worked in America as well, but always had a real sort of it was a growing passion over those years for film and photography and running my own business and all the challenges that would sort of bring. It took me a few years, sort of 2 or 3 years, to kind of really work that out while I was still in banking. But it was a very sort of like jump into a very, very different industry, and it's just been, and it continues to be, the wildest and amazing ride. So I'm very grateful.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, that must have been an exciting journey in its own right, but I know from speaking to a lot of other people who've made that transition from a full-time role into running your own business, myself included in this,
Yes.
Was this a gradual thing for you? Was there like a one moment that said, I can't do this anymore, I'm moving here? What's your story of transition from that?
I think there was, for the first few years, especially, I think in the working for some of the sort of the bigger banks there was like loads and loads of training, worked with some really, really lovely people. And my managers were great people, but like super intelligent, very inspiring. So there's a lot of things that really clicked for me in terms of what I want out of a career, and lots of growth. And there was sort of something there that wasn't in terms of like a real sort of like a real passion. I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy economics and speak to a lot of my friends of my course that I studied at uni, and we still talk about a lot of business stuff all the time. So that always still really interests me. But I remember at the time when I was sort of still in banking, I'd speak to a few people and friends, and they'd be doing different things, and you'd meet with them and their eyes would light up and their speech would go faster when they were talking about what they were doing. And I just had a few realizations. I was like, I don't have that yet. And I really sort of quite a deep soul level, I want to find out what that is. So I was just anyway outside of banking, like studying photography classes. I did a few sort of 6-8 week long sort of evening classes down in Brixton at a photography place, and then took a few weeks off work and didn't go on holiday, but studied a photography course in London. And then one of the women that moved back into my team in one of my last banking roles, she'd just taken a year out, and she'd done a 9-month long photography course, very industry aligned course at one of the universities here in London. And we just went out for lunch, and she was talking about it, and she was like, it's it's like an incredible course, and you should have a look and see if it's for you. And I applied for that, put a portfolio together, and got on. And I think at the time it was like, well, I had 6 years of experience in banking, some great connections,
Yeah.
still a real interest in it. It wasn't like I hated it or anything.
Right.
But I was like, oh, like I'm going to study something I love here for like 8, 9 months. I'd saved up the money. I was like, well, like that's just a gift in itself. So just go with the journey on that. And then the more I sort of studied it, there was a friend of mine from uni at the time. Her boyfriend was a photographer. I went out for lunch with him a few times, assisted him on a few shoots. Started to, and then yeah, once I sort of got to the end of it, I was like, I have to give this a go now.
Right.
And that was like July 2007, I think. Yeah, July 2007. Uh, yeah, and I just like the buzz I have now from it, like just hasn't waned at all. It's still as
Yeah.
much as like a sort of a passion outside of work as it is kind of work. So it's
Yeah.
it's ticked all the boxes.
Oh, wonderful. And
Yeah,
did you have like just out of interest here, did you have like
yeah.
a like cut off points, like right from here on in, that's all I'm going to do, and I'm going to take the risk? Did you? I know some people find a way of transitioning and just going,
Mm,
I'm going to get some jobs on the weekend to check that it works, check that I can get paid for this, and then I'll
yes.
go down to 3 days a week. Did you do either of those or a different version for yourself?
Yeah, I think there's for me, I'd uh on day one, I just went all in on photography. I think about
Right.
8 or 9 months in, um, there was a point. I think it was like like February. I think of the following year, it was getting a little bit sort of quieter,
Yeah.
and I was sort of questioning a few bits and pieces. And I was like, okay, look, I'm going to go back to banking for 6 months and like save a lot of money again, and then kind of do as you said, sort of like split it,
Yeah.
and take jobs, etc. I remember going. I went back in for an interview at UBS actually with some old teammates, and I had my phone switched off. And the interview went well, and I really enjoyed it. And I sort of came out and switched my phone back on, and like a massive job had sort of come in while I was in the interview. That was sort of like 3 or 4 months' money, and I was like, and it was weird. Like, I didn't speak to anyone about the interview, and they never contacted me. It just there was nothing
Fizzled
sort of
out.
said, and it
Yeah.
was like, um, so that was like almost like, okay, there's maybe some signs that I still need to go a bit further on this journey. But yeah, it
Brilliant.
was amazing. It literally just came out of the blue in that hour that I was in the interview, and I was like, okay, well, that's a sign. Like, kind of keep going, and yeah, and then no, I didn't. That was it for me basically. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's no right or wrong there at all. I think it's everyone's own individual circumstances in terms of how you approach such a big transition,
Mm.
and what else you've got in your life,
Yeah.
responsibility wise, etc. At that time, yeah.
Yeah. No, wonderful. So tell us a bit more about what you do now, and
Yeah.
particularly this angle of who you help, how you help them. But
Mm,
what's the connection when you go in and you work with your clients? What are you bringing
yes.
to the table, and what do they get out of the experience?
Mm, yeah, there's lots of different areas that I could sort of talk about here, and I will go through the various ones there. I think if you take just, I think if we start like being on set, and I think I shot a campaign a few weeks ago with Spurs, like with the new kit launch with a lot of their sort of top female and top male players
Right.
in it, and that was a great example of a lot of the stuff I think I'm going to say now. But um, there's a part of my job on set like that where uh, I'm sure a lot of other people can relate to this in their own industry, but it's a high pressure environment where a lot of things change very, very last minute, and you have to be able to sort of react to that
Mm.
in a way. And for me, being able to be in a position like taking a step back, like how do you react? Uh, like what kind of environment and what kind of person do you need to be able to react? Because when the pressure's on, like I think your brain waves will go into a faster sort of beta sort of brain waves, and that's not the place where the best ideas come or the best solutions or anything. So there's a lot of work that I do. We'll come to in a minute in terms of breathwork, meditation, health, etc. I do with a lot of my sports clients, and a lot of things that I've learned from elite athletes as well in
Right.
conversations, and
Yeah.
that I bring into this. So in terms of making helping people perform better. So on set, if I'm with a top tier talent, like my team, me, as a director or a photographer, I'm like the lead energy on that set. You've got 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, 5 people. Like whether someone comes in and they've done 100 shoots, 1,000 shoots or none, like it's my responsibility to drive that sort of pulse through
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
So Um, I think if there's one consistent thing that I hear like from so many clients I have done for years, it's like how calm and how positive my sets are, and probably me as well. So I do a lot of stuff beforehand. Like the Spurs example was a classic one.
Mm.
We had like a 2 or 3 hour window where all the players were coming through. We've been there for like 3 or 4 hours anyway, doing like creating this giant sort of set. Uh, turns at start of the time they started, no one comes through. An hour later, still no one's come through. Now we've only got like an hour before we have to move on to another location, but someone still no one's come through. And then all of a sudden, everybody arrived at the same time.
Right.
So you've got that kind of like tension. And our set was just the energy was amazing. The players all just like absolutely loved it. The client agency, everyone just really enjoyed it, and the work looked amazing. And it's because there was an anchor in that of like, okay, I have to like the set has to be super positive to allow everyone to create their best work and their best performance.
Yeah.
And there has to be an anchor of like, even if I wasn't totally like completely feeling, I have to be completely calm because a few things changed that we technically had to adjust as well on the time, and I can't be in a out of kill or slightly stressful way. So that in terms of like an effective creative photographer director or someone like that, I think there's an underlying thread that you have to like all the shoots I did with this girl Cam, for example, for a few years, a beautiful, really iconic campaign that has an incredible impact.
Yeah.
A lot of the women that are coming on to set, obviously, they're not used to a set like this. It's a real like and there's got to be an instant calmness. Sort of, they feel it when they come on, and it's like, look, everyone just have a great time. Pressure's on me. You just enjoy the day. The results will be amazing. You'll love them. And for me, it's like that's how I help people perform at their best. Like all my team, whether it's lighting assistants, digital, like every element that creates that end result, they all have to know that, look, you're coming on today. We're going to create the set for you where you can give your best and have a fantastic time doing it. And just like, don't worry about anything. It's on me. Right. And it's kind of like, that's really how, in terms of how I help people, I think, perform at their best in terms of the time we have in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And it's the same if I'm interviewing people. It's just making sure that you do a hell of a lot of prep beforehand. Everything is so that I have to put myself in a position where and I take this from a lot of real like top level sports people I've seen on set or I've spoken with afterwards, and some of those really I think Alan Wynne-Jones, the Wales or the Welsh rugby captain, was a classic example. I just remember watching his body language in the shoots that we did with Under Armour and with them, and just like his leadership came through that calm authority as well.
Right.
And I don't know, I've seen it with various sports people. I've seen sort of there's really high pressure things when it's a penalty to take a team through to a Champions League final, win a World Cup, or that putt for the US Masters or whatever that is. Those really, really, really elite performers, they kind of like, the higher the pressure, the calmer they sort of get. Like like loads of people out there can execute what they're doing, but they just get calmer. And I think that's the sort of where I start to bring in sort of elements of like what I see, what I've sort of heard and what I speak to about in terms of real world-class performers in terms of the sports field and people I work with, then what I read from a business perspective and a spirituality. And I try to sort of bring it all on board so that, I can sort of let people bring their best to the game, as it were, really.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I think some amazing insights from a general leadership perspective. There's a couple of things that come to mind for me. One is the deliberate nature of what you're doing. You're preparing, you're understanding the context, the environment, the physical and the mental and emotional setup that will allow people to perform at their best, and you're taking action to make sure that's the case. Yeah, I think that's one great thing. And the other one that comes to mind, and I found this from my time in the world of F1 and some of the leadership stories that came through there, is those times of pressure. Your job as a leader is to absorb that and to sort of elude calm and sort of you might not be calm inside. Things might be happening internally, but you've got to exude that calm to your team in order for them to work at their best as well, isn't it?
I knew you'd have had experience at that, but it's something I was very increasingly conscious of over the last few years, and having done so many of these sort of shoots now is the need to kind of, to develop and be aware of that, and just the impact that the positive impact that can have for everyone.
Brilliant. And
Yeah,
you mentioned the This Girl Can campaign, which
yeah.
an amazing piece in its own right. What were some of the experiences you took from that? Just the whole campaign as such,
Mm.
or specific examples within it.
Yeah, a great question. It's you know, it, an iconic campaign. I remember a couple of years before I sort of I shot that, I think, in 2018 and 2019, and some of 2020 actually as well. And a couple of years before that, I went to a talk at one of the agencies here in London. I sat in the front row with my agent, and one of the heads from Sport England were up on the stage talking about the campaign, and I just sort of turned my agent, and I was like, I really want to shoot this, don't you? And I was like, okay, like let's just work, let's just start sort of being quite intentional and putting some energy and visualizing that, and making sure that our work stands up, etc. And then out of the blue, they contacted us,
Mm.
had sort of seen the work, which was lovely, and it was so special. The energy on set every day, it was just amazing. Like everyone that comes on set to be photographed and filmed, like they all really back the campaign, and that like what you're creating hopefully is going to really is really going to positively impact people's lives and get people moving and into various sort of sports and fitnesses and everything around that. You know yourself, like in that world, it's the more active and you are in that, the better you feel, the better everyone around you and in your family and friends and everyone you interact with kind of feels, and the social side of sport and fitness and the clubs and the friendships, and when you're creating, and I think it shines through all of those shoots, just the laughs and the energy, and it was tons of different sports and fitness and different acts. So like great from a creative perspective, because shooting badminton to yoga to rugby and football and everything. So different sort of sports and disciplines all the time, and different technical things I had to sort of be aware of. But just like every one of them, just sort of you'd leave the day and just be like, oh yeah, that was really special, really special. And everyone everyone wanted to be there. And we're really grateful for it and having fun, and a lot of the ladies came, that volunteered or were cast, might not have ever done that before, and all of a sudden they're like, oh wow, didn't I really enjoyed this, and they get curious about it. So even the shoot hopefully has sort of inspired them to do that sort of specific activity. But yeah, very blessed. It was a really it was a lovely one to be part of and bring my skills to the table.
Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll make sure we've got a link in the show notes here that
Thanks, man.
people can go and have a look and check that work out, and check out the campaign as well, because I've seen lots of it, and it's truly inspirational, and the whole quality of the work comes through. So I mean, congrats to you and the whole team who's pulled that together. So
huge team effort. Thank you. Yeah. Like everyone that we shot, like they just really brought the energy and the laughs. It was good.
Yeah, awesome. Are there any other sort of highlights from some of the work that you've done, either individuals that you've worked with, or things, or campaigns, or jobs that you've been on that have really stuck with you about helping you to perform in some way?
God, that's a great question. Yeah, lots in many ways actually. One that always sort of jumps out for me was a night shoot, a campaign I shot in Stockholm years ago. It was for it was the first shoot I ever did for Nike, and it was so it was a sort of through the night sort of like shoot. So I think we started at 8 p.m, finished at 8 a.m.
Wow.
And loads of stuff. It was just incredible. Like the buzz was just like off the charts of creating it, but loads of kind of lessons that I sort of reflected on afterwards. I was, long story, I was in New York when the brief came through on like a bit of a vacation, staying with friends, but I was also meeting up with a potential new agent over there. And I kind of just come out of a meeting with her, and she looked at everything, loved the work, and she's like, yeah, but you're not going to get a Nike campaign. You're not going to get this. And I was like, okay. And I love it. Any point, even like going into photography, people said, oh, if someone says I can't do it, I just like have a little smile to myself. That's probably the number one thing I want to hear, actually, just full stop. So right. Like, okay, cool. Let's see about that.
Yeah.
It's always, I think even from being a kid, like it's just always inspired me. If someone said I can't do something, I'm like, I'm going to do it. So I'd just been told, number one, that my work wasn't good enough to shoot for them. And then the technicality of the brief was really, they wanted to execute it in a certain way. I suggested something that was 10 times harder to execute, but I thought was doable. So they never worked with me before. It's a through the night shoot. I'm jet lagged because I went pretty much straight from there to London for a day. I'm out of the time zone. It's hot. It was minus whatever throughout the night.
Right.
Like a lot of things that were quite technically quite challenging, and they just changed everything and gone, okay, we totally trust you. We're going to execute it in this way. And it was quite it was like each shot was made up of like 7 or 8 different like images. And it was a technical thing to do. We didn't have that much time. I couldn't have probably made it any harder on myself to kind of execute. It went really well. Like the high at the end of that shoot was just like, oh my days. I got back to the hotel room at like 8:30 in the morning, didn't sleep, couldn't sleep the next afternoon. I was just still like wired for days. It was the lessons for me that it was just so, number one, I think I'd kind of set the limit a bit too low in terms of what I could like resiliently kind of deal with.
Right.
Because I was like, oh, I definitely need some sleep to be able to work well. No, I can still work really well without any. The cold, the technicalities, the pressure of what they were like, they totally changed the approach because of how I wanted to do it. So everything's now on me.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out. First time with that brand, a brand that I wanted to, work with for a while at that point. And just the enjoyment level, it was just off the charts. So I think it was a great one to kind of deliver, just to kind of show someone that had just told me I would never work for that brand.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I just like, not that I was really, it wasn't like, look at me. It was more a case of like, oh, do you know what? Like, I believe in myself.
Right.
I've worked very, very hard to this point. I, of course, like expect a lot of no's along the way, of course, no problem. But that was really, really nice in terms of like maybe even making me realize a little bit more about my own potential, not to kind of sell myself a little bit short.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that one jumps out straight off the bat, but it's probably so to come back to question you, it's about what shoots have really jumped out that have made me like look at my own performance.
Or just or maybe just some real insights that you've
Yeah.
that come back and you go, that was a moment that really sticks with me for whatever reason.
Yeah, and the other one I'd say is there's a short film that will be in one of the links that we share called Wally, that we created in 2019. Wally Nori, Afghan national who's working for the British Army in Afghanistan, lost his sight in an IED explosion. He's a blind marathon runner,
right?
And I met him on a New Balance shoot in March of that year, and I'd done a lot of work over like, the 10 years before with various sort of visually impaired charities. And it was something that always really resonated. I met him. His willpower, he's like he was just such a beautiful soul, and we really connected. So we stayed in contact, and then as a personal project, we created a 5-minute short film about him.
Right.
He's a family man, father of 3.
Yeah.
Never seen his children, which for me was just sort of something to really absorb. But as in terms of someone that I've spent time with, that's completely made me reframe what's possible. And his attitude to life, and he uses sport as the vehicle. He was a really good like long distance runner, as a teenager and a boxer, and always loved sport. And he had to rehabilitate his life and support his family now, and he used sport as the medium to do that. And he's done loads of other like incredible things now. And just as someone that just like has like nothing is impossible for this man. You spend like 10 minutes with him, you just can walk away, and you're like, okay, I really need to like set some bigger goals for myself. He's a beautiful soul, amazing human being. So Wally and all the calls and working with him, and that will always sort of stick out, and it's kind of something I remind myself of as regularly as I can as well.
Brilliant. I mean those people and those moments where you walk away and you go, I really should be doing more. What am I what's my excuse for today?
For sure. I'd advise everyone just to sort of check it out and check him out and what he's sort of doing, because he's sort of constantly coming up with new like incredible challenges to raise money for charity and sort of help his family out. But like really brave, really courageous, kind human being.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. There's another area that I wanted to cover off and ask you a
Yeah.
question about. 1% for the planet.
Yes.
You have that on both your website, your LinkedIn. You mentioned
Mm.
that. Tell us about 1% for the planet and what that means to you and how you got involved.
Yeah. So beginning of the pandemic in 2020, sort of just took a sort of a big step back, um, and was just looking at different areas of my business and how I could create more impact with what I was doing. And I was speaking to a company up in Scotland called Meander Apparel, and they were a member. I saw this logo, 1% for the planet. Never heard of it,
Mm.
and so, oh, what's this interesting? And basically, it's a global network of businesses that it was started by the founder of Patagonia,
Right.
and one of the guys, been running for, but basically, from companies of that size to individuals like myself that every year commit to giving 1% of their sales,
Right.
irrespective of profits, 1% of their sales to environmental nonprofits. And there's a big list of like partnerships. You can choose, whatever that amount was, you can give it all to one
Right.
environmental nonprofit that really resonates with you, or you can split it between as many as you want. But every year, you commit to that. Yeah, and I spoke to them and I was like, this is definitely something I want to sort of add and do.
Mm.
So obviously, the better, it's another sort of spur. So the better you do each year, the more money you can get to contribute as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we now, 2023? Yeah, 3 years into it. Yeah, it's been incredible. And they had a big sort of event, or multiple day event in October last year in London. The first time they kind of done that, and I went and photographed it all. Met a lot of the other sort of UK members, and have also now shot for a few of their different businesses.
Right.
Going over to the US in the fall of this year to shoot some more work for them as well. But it's really opened my eyes up. And Surfers Against Sewage is one of the sort of
Right.
charities or environmental partners that I support. So I've learned a lot more about their work and connected with them. And yeah, it just feels like the right way for me to kind of to set and do business. And it's been nice to a few other people sort of that either work for companies. You don't have to have your own business. You could just agree to give 1% of your salary to
Yeah.
them each year as well if you're working for a big organization. But yeah, a really wonderful network that's getting bigger and bigger and having a bigger and bigger impact. And yeah, it's been a tremendous journey with it so far.
Oh, fantastic! And
Yeah,
such a great way of connecting many people to do
yeah,
greater good with a small thing that people can do and can generally absorb
yeah.
quite easily and unknowingly in a lot of ways, isn't it? And then,
Mm,
as you say, the more people who get involved, the more can have an impact across all these different things that are going to ultimately affect us all in the future.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I definitely sort of encourage people to sort of, learn more about it themselves, and if it resonates, then yeah, to jump all in.
Yeah, and again, we'll make sure the links are in there so that people can have a look
Cool.
and check it out for themselves. So,
Yeah.
um, you've touched on a couple of areas here, but um, in terms of your own performance,
Mm,
and what you do to help you be at your best,
yeah.
what are some of the things that you do, and what are the practices or the approaches that you take?
Mm. I think with a lot of the things that I shoot within the sort of wellness and the fitness and sports area, it's always been something that I've been interested in since I was a kid and been part of my life. And I think probably without kind of knowing it, that uh, peak performance as a whole is something that's always really been very, very interesting to me, full stop. And probably something I don't know, it's like an inner knowing that like I'm meant to contribute a lot, and peak performance is very, my own peak performance is completely intrinsic to that.
Yeah,
So like on a day-to-day basis, like diet, etc., is a sort of a number one thing. And meditation, I think, well, actually, no, diet's very big, but meditation and a mindfulness practice and movement are the kind of the key pillars for me.
right.
Um, that's sort of the if and I sort of touched on it at the start of the call in terms of how do I positively impact people. Well, a lot of my work is idea generation and and a lot of production things are around shoots. It's not just the sort of time on set. And I think all of my biggest and best ideas, all of my most sort of inspired actions, and me taking the right actions, all come from a clarity of thought, a calmness. Those you know, it's the eureka moments that happen when you're in the shower or going for a run or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm very, very conscious that and it's been amplified the last few years. Like my son Ziggy now is sort of 5, and I realized like quite soon after becoming a dad that like my only window for any kind of like quiet thinking time or reflecting time is before he wakes up and before my wife wakes up. So it's like, okay, cool, alarm set for like stupid o'clock, like 5 o'clock or 4:45 or something every day. Get up, you know, meditate, move, yoga, etc. Then I just need to put myself in the happiest, calmest frame of mind possible. All my best ideas come from that. I think the calmness and positivity that I spoke about that I bring on set, like nothing comes from being stressed for me or trying to do too many things at once. Like I never have a really breakthrough idea. Probably do the wrong thing. Like for me, it's like efficiency and effectiveness come from, at the end of the day, I want to have the biggest impact with my work as possible, but also, that should be hand in hand and with enjoying every moment on this planet as much as possible and for everyone that I interact with. So if I can show up for my son, for my wife, for my friends, for my business, for everyone as happy and calm and just enjoying things, like everything is going to be better. Like my decision making is going to be better. Right. My idea generation, like everything that I'm here to do, I can trace back probably even like, being on this sort of call, one of your previous guests, Hugo, it was conversations with him end of last year. And I was it was from a kind of a period of like reflection and meditation that I reached back out to him because I hadn't spoken to him for a year or so. We then spoke. I spoke about wanting to do more of this and passing on my experiences to help other people. And he said to reach out to you. So a lot of the good things, they will just come from that. And I'm very aware that if I could do all these things, I'm going to make the right decisions, and then I'm in a place to use my intelligence the way it should be, work really hard, work systematically, do all the things that you should do. And and I grind it out, and I love working hard. And I'm not saying I just sort of meditate and sit there and expect everything to happen. No, it's like I do this is like that's what I do whenever I can, as much or as deep as I can, to anchor myself in that, and then sort of move forward with everything from a creative perspective. And I've just found, for me personally, like that's been like fundamental to sort of I can really trace everything back to that anchor, really.
Yeah, no, some wonderful stuff there. And I think that there's a couple of previous guests who've talked about very similar things, and but one of the things that I've been reflecting on myself recently is the element of deliberate practice and doing something every day. It doesn't have to be anything big, but if you can choose sort of a few areas, don't try and overdo it, but you can start with one or two, and it might be movement. How have I moved today?
Yeah,
and it might just be I've walked to the car because I parked further, than I would have done previously. Yeah. It's just a thing, and now you've done a thing, make it bigger tomorrow, or repeat it tomorrow, so that you've got that consistency. But it's I think I love those elements of movement, meditation, and mindfulness. It's simple stuff that goes right. What am I going to do today or tomorrow, if you're planning for tomorrow, that's going to have that are opportunities to hit home in those areas, and then reflecting on the back of the day, what have I done in those areas and what have I learned? It doesn't take a lot, does it? But it can really build up over time.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's for me it's and you can always it's very easy for me to link it back to kind of sports analogies, but I think I think number one, it's like, I don't know if anyone else resonates with this, but like I'm with a couple of person. Oh, I didn't meditate long enough today. Oh, I didn't move, and then all of a sudden, there isn't enough time often in the day to do all of these things that are going to be beneficial. Yeah. So I've had to come to peace with some days meditation shorter, or I don't get to work out or do as much movement, but I know the benefits of each, and you just try and do as much as you can or as well as you can in the time that you've got each day, and just be kind of at peace with that.
Yeah.
The repetition for me is of anything, whether it's a new skill, like any new skill, or and this is as much of that. It's the repetition that I think is it compounds and for me layers on top of each other, and all of a sudden you don't think you're breaking through, but then you probably are, and you don't know anyway. But like you have those big things like anything, it just compounds, and I see that in the sports world. The best in the world have probably worked the hardest at that point and hit the most golf balls or done they've practiced the most and they've failed the most, I should imagine, as well, and struck out the most. But they've also, so for me, it's the repetition of those things, and I know the difference now. My own, on days that I might get a bit grumpier or something like that, it's probably because I haven't done a few of the things, or I haven't hydrated as well, or breath work as well. That's intrinsically tied in to that for me as well, Paul. That's been an absolute game changer, and all these things. The beauty of them is they're free. It's a 10-minute walk or a quick run or 2 or 3 minutes of meditation or 2 or 3 minutes of breathing. Like they're all like these things that fundamentally change everything about us. And it's wonderful now for me. Just I think at this time, being alive, you've got the 1,000-year-old sort of the more kind of spiritual and those ideas exactly, but being proven by the breakthroughs in neuroscience and sort of quantum physics and all that world. So it's that they're both saying the same thing. It's an amazing time to, if certain people would be more skeptical if they couldn't prove it. It's here's all the leading scientific minds in the world saying that nothing exists and everything's moving and blah blah blah. So it's a wonderful time for, if you wanted to dive deep into understanding how your brain changes when you do things, or these are the benefits and here's actually what's happening. It's like, oh wow, okay, like I'm going to do that, and it's it's just things that for me, every decision in life is a higher chance of being the right one and more enjoyable if you're starting in a happier place. And all these things really are kind of done to put me in that spot to then make better decisions and just enjoy the process as well. That's been a new one for me the last few months. Not just that, but like get joy out of the actual doing, and just really be super present and enjoy that, and not no focus on the results, because you're aiming for something, but like a lot of the times when I've delivered something or I've worked with someone that I've wanted to for 2 or 3 years, like the high of that's quite short lived, and that was kind of interesting. It's like, oh, like what's gonna but like for me, if I can step back and say no, just like tie it into like the joy is in the actual doing. Just like stay with that, like don't think that far ahead, and like the results will be naturally better, I think. I know for that anyway, but that's a kind of a new little one that I'm working on.
I was re-listening to one of the old Johnny Wilkinson episode of the High Performance podcast a while back, and that whole bit of his whole life was set up to win the World Cup. And the moment he wins the World Cup, it's this euphoric high, and he's like 5 seconds later, I'm down in the dumps and I'm literally going into depression, and now he's being able to find joy, and he's like, I enjoy doing the washing up as much as I enjoy doing something else. It's like whatever it is that's in front of me, enjoy doing that, enjoy the process of what you're doing, and be present for it. I think it's a lot of lessons that we learn there.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that one, but that's exactly. It's the same. I've listened to interviews with like Michael Phelps and people like that, and is that exactly the same thing? And I think even for me in my world, I've always sort of, the high of like working with a lot of these people and creating those bigger shoots, or the shoots that have like, the This Girl Can, those other ones that have had an amazing impact. I'm sure other creatives or people in my field that love it as much as me will sort of feel this. Like the high is just like nothing else. But there's a crash. Like there is a definite crash, and I think to your point there, I think like if it can just be about like the joy in doing everything there, and for me, a bigger reminder of like why I'm doing a lot of stuff and the kind of people, the impact I want to have with my work. I think I've 16 years in. I think starting out, like it was very important for me to get certain brands on board and things like that, and some ego sort of within that as well, not too much but a bit. But like of course I love doing those shoots now, because there's some really amazing experiences. But I think for me now it's like, okay, how do I get all of this out of my head from the last 16 years and all the lessons I've learned? I didn't go through them all for no one else to benefit and for me to share them now. And it's like that being present there, and then being able to sort of serve with everything I do, and that still includes the big shoots. But that's the kind of like thing that really keeps me up now.
Brilliant. So, which brings us nicely to this next question, which is if you could
Yeah.
help anyone, any
Mm.
individual team or organization with your skill set, who would that be and why?
I think we touched on 1% for the planet.
Yep.
That's it. For me, that like year on year, and I've sort of seen it the last few years. It's like more and more of the environmental non-profits within that world.
Yep.
There's been other pieces of sort of just consulting that I've done for them as well to sort of to contribute and help out. So a lot of the businesses and the environmental non-profits within that network, I
Mm.
think. And for me, the last as well as a lot of the sort of high-end sports and lifestyle campaigns that you're seeing there, I'm doing a hell of a lot more now. Also, just within other sectors, but there's an underlying or there's a through thread which is like positively changing people's lives, whether that's an environmental or a social change or a wellness change. That's the thread. So I
Right.
think they're the with Hugo's company, the Startup Sherpas, we
Yeah.
created a like, beautiful
Amazing.
3-minute video for them in April, and just sort of spending time with the teenagers that have gone through that program. And
Right.
you know, we're at the FTA. Just those kind of campaigns for me, like really light me up. So it's those opportunities, and I think the wider thing just to bring my sort of skill set to serve as well. There's lots of
Mm.
younger creatives that we're helping now, and opportunities we're creating on set for younger creatives that wouldn't have had that before, and getting them paid opportunities in the industry, and just again like passing on. That's really important to me, as well as sort of who I'm creating for. It's like what doors am I opening as
Right.
well,
Mm.
and what sort of change can I have like within my industry as well. So yeah, they're the things.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, and I know Hugo and the startup Sherpas do some amazing
Yeah.
work on that front. So
Yes. Yeah.
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 Um, and if we were to flip that on its head and say, if you could sit down and have a coffee, have a drink, have a meal with somebody
Mm.
that you could really learn from, or would love to learn from, who would that be?
Yeah. Written a few down actually on my notes here, but there's different elements. As I said, like sort of the spirituality and the meditation side is a really big driver for me, and it translates into my work if we're talking about a work and performance perspective. So
Yep.
um, I spent some time recently with quite a few monks, and being around their energy for a weekend was just completely like transformative on many levels. So
Right.
time in those environments or in those kind of places is really big for me.
Yep.
I think there's uh, I just really like greatness and people in any field that have sort of hit that top level. So I really enjoy the conversations with a lot of the athletes that I have, or very sort of business people, or people that are very high up in the wellness and fitness industry. Those are always really exciting conversations. Yeah, and I think there's a few other sort of podcasts that I listen to. I try to sort of take on board a lot of sort of what's been sort of said there, and the habits and the mentalities of these people, and try and bring it into my world, and how I can, you know, be a better father, be a better at my, my business, how I look at things from a more of a macro perspective sometimes as
Right.
well. So I think a lot of those things are really good for me, and I love to read as well. So a lot of I'm very curious about, like, as I've mentioned before, like the sort of science of what's happening in your brain when you're going through into these different
Yep.
states and using breath work. That, Wim Hof's work's really interesting, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, his work's fascinating. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief, is an outstanding sort of book of talking about the biology of this, and actually how
Yeah.
visualization works, and how like all these other practices actually work and cellularly change things, and the curiosity I have around that and bringing that into my work. That's always been a really big thing for me. Like I've been very the more time I've really looked at sort of the belief side of things, and been very intentional and looked at things from a
Mm.
visual perspective. And like a lot of the sports people that I've spoken to and shot with, they're very adept at sort of spending the time to visualize themselves like winning that trophy,
Right.
or hitting that time, or doing whatever, or being a success. So that's a really big exploratory sort of thing that's worked for me. Not unbelievably well, that's the wrong word. It's worked for me very well in some very specific situations over the years. So I think the more I can put into getting better and being a bit more intentional around that, and I see that as a big part of like just a full belief that it's going to happen, and like do that, and then go forward and just keep doing the work and keep doing the work and keep doing the work, and just a trust in the process. So probably didn't answer the question, but a lot of those areas are like I think are big ones for me in terms of my own performance.
Yeah.
And for sure, things I'm working on all the time.
Yeah. Oh, some wonderful stuff there, and I think we can all learn from all sorts of different angles, and I think it's what's coming through strongly is the sort of passion to learn, and that in itself is something that people can't take away from you, and if you really engage in that, then you're going to learn from whatever circumstance you're in. So kudos for that, really. And final bit really is about if people want to find out more, if they want to check out your work, if they want to contact you, maybe engage you in some way, where do people go? How do they connect and find out more about you?
No, thank you. My website is a good place to start, duncannicholls.co.uk. A lot of my sort of and also goodplanets.tv. So Good Planets is more for the film side of my work. Where I sort of co-direct a lot of pieces with a great friend of mine, Tobias. So there's a lot of work there, and all the links to various sort of social platforms. But yeah, if anything's resonated, or if anyone has any questions or would just like to see the work, then thank you very much. That's the sort of best place to start, I'd say.
Yeah. Wonderful. As always, I would encourage the listeners to do reach out to people. When I've talked to my guests offshoot quite a lot about, what happens? Do people actually contact you and say it's very rare? But when it happens, there's always a great connection. There's always learnings from both sides. Nobody ever regrets engaging in those conversations. So if something's resonated with you today, or if you want to find out more, I'm sure Duncan, like any of the guests here, would welcome that contact and follow up.
Yeah, 100%. It's amazing, isn't it, Paul? I'm sure you've had the same way. Just that one conversation with someone can really change the trajectory or speed things up for you, or really kind of connect you with the person you need to. So yeah, if anything is really stuck for anyone, and anyone has any questions, then please do reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Superb. Well, really enjoyed this conversation today, Duncan, and I'm sure there's so much more we could discuss as well at some point. But thanks so much for being on the show today, Duncan Nicholls.
Oh, thank you, Paul. It was it was really special. I really appreciate you for everything you're doing here, and all the people you're helping with with everything each week. So we're very blessed. Thank you for the opportunity, my friend, and I look forward to hearing more of your great episodes.
Much appreciated. Cheers. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.